This morning we're with Arthur Keller, is Ruth Ruffle and Flo Snyder, and we're going to let Arthur talk about a whole lot of things about Fairhope. I think he's going to start with his family. Take it away, Arthur.
Well, first, I'm a native Fairhopean, and I was born on Fairhope Avenue on the corner of Summit Street and Fairhope Avenue on the southwest corner in 1919, November the 15th. And old Dr. Volney Showalter is the one that delivered me, and my middle name is Volney, named after Dr. Volney Showalter, and my first name was after Arthur Mishaps, Dr. Arthur Mishaps. So I've got some roots in Fairhope. Anyway, the house that I was born in, they moved it back on south on Summit Street, and it's still in existence. It's a two-story board and batten house, and it's the upstairs was the bedroom upstairs, and that's where I was born. There wasn't no hospitals or anything like that when I was born. The doctors came to the house and delivered you, and that was it. Well, get back to my family. On my father's side, they came down here about the time the Fairhope Single Tanks Colony was being formed. They came in, best I could figure, around 1900, and it was my great-grandfather, who was Joseph Keller. And Joseph had the land leased from the colony, which is bounded on the south by Fairhope Avenue and on the east by School Street, and on the north by Magnolia Avenue, and then on the west by the street that used to run right by the Fairhope Ice and Creamery Company.
Which is Bancroft.
Bancroft Street, okay. Anyway, he built quite a few houses on there, and on the southeast corner, he had a blacksmith shop, and that was back before the Jeffcotts used to live on that place there. And then right in the middle of the block, just across the street from Dahlgreen Hall, was a two-story board and batten house that stood over there. And I don't know whether my great-grandfather lived in that or what, but anyway, when I was a little boy, the Quakers came in there and they jacked that thing up and they hauled it out on Fairhope Avenue and hauled it to School Street, and they had the winch it with a great big old winch that went around and around like this, and the things that they put it on was old saw logs, made wheels out of logs. Anyway, they moved it down to School Street, and they moved it down School Street to Morphy Avenue, and they moved it out on Morphy Avenue to the last house on Morphy Avenue on the north side of the road, and today it's still in existence out there.
Oh, that's really interesting, because Raymond Stanley remembers living there as a child, and he is very attached to that house, and he's hoping that it'll be kept. He'd like to buy it, but they didn't want to sell it.
Well, I went out and took some pictures here a while back, and I found out that the man built a great big house back of it, and from what I heard he was going to tear that place down, and I'd hate to see it be torn down, but
Oh my!
because it don't have any historical plaque on there, but it was one of the oldest houses in Fairhope that I know of.
What
And
is
it was right next door to the house where my younger brother was born.
Well, I'll declare.
And he was born in 1914.
Where?
Right across from where Cummings Hall was, on that corner of Bancroft and Fairhope Avenue.
Oh, before it was moved. He was
No,
born
it
there
wasn't
before
that
it was...
house. It was a smaller one.
It's a little
Oh,
house there on the
okay.
corner, and actually in that little house on the corner, my aunt and uncle lived in there at one time. Guy Wilson and Mary Wilson lived in that little house before it was. I think they was the last ones that lived in it before they tore it down. Mm-hmm. That's right there on the corner where, well, there's a vacant spot there now, but the Sherman Pecan Company was right on the corner.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, there's quite a few Keller homes in Fairhope besides the Joseph Keller property there. He bought some property down down where the old Frigo place is on 27 Joseph Keller bought the section where the old Frigo place was, and then he bought the section across the street from it, and then the quarter of a section north of that where, oh, I can't think of the guy's name now, but anyway, it was about 2 sections and a quarter, and he paid $1,960 for it. And it was to settle in the estate of some owner up in New York City. And then when he got rid of it, he divided it up into his children, who had came down here from Kansas with him. And this was about 1900, right at 1900. And he divided it up, and all his children went back to Kansas, disposed of their property and went back to Kansas, except my grandfather and my great aunt. And
What were their names?
my grandfather was Emmanuel Keller, and my aunt was named Johnson. All I know is later on she moved down to Miami, Florida, and she died down there at an old age. But anyway, my grandfather built a home out, and they call it the old Keller place, which is where Henry Bishop used to live, which was on Brown Street, on South Brown Street. The street went by Stimson's field out there, and you went down south and back up on the hill back there. Henry Bishop, when he was a young man, lived there. Well, that was the old Keller place. That was the old Emmanuel Keller place. And that's where my father and his 6 brothers grew up there. And then later on, Emmanuel Keller built a house on the corner of Kiefer Street and North Summit Street on the northwest corner. And it's still in existence today.
Mm-hmm.
And talking about construction, my father built a house on Fells Avenue from the Lutheran Church. It's the second house on the south side of the road there, 2-story house. And when he built that house, the materials in it cost $750.
Mm-hmm.
And it's still in existence.
That was south of the what is now the Lutheran.
It was
West.
west of
West.
on Fells Avenue.
Oh yeah. And it was a 2-story house.
2-story house like this.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And
yeah, I've been there.
And was that his occupation? He was a builder?
well, my father was a carpenter. They didn't have contractors back then. They just worked.
Right.
And then my father built a house on School Street. And whenever he built the house, when he was on colony land, he always built it up on so that if he ever got in Dutch with the colony and couldn't pay his rent, he could jack it up and move it off.
Good idea.
It was, how many did he move off?
He never did move any off. The house on School Street still belongs to my sister and I, and that house, all the materials came into the Fairhope Pier from Fort Morgan. It was used lumbers and used timbers, and the timbers under that house were 8 by 10 and about 24 foot long, and they're solid heart pine. And we had occasion to...
How long did you say they were?
24 foot
24?
long. Then we had an occasion to decide to... Well, when we first went in there, we didn't have nothing but lamps, oil lamps. As a matter of fact, I've got one of the lamps that my mother gave me that when I was a kid, I used to study by it. And we had to decide to have the house wired. Well, they wired the house up in the attic, but my mother wanted some base plugs to have floor lamps around, so this cousin, who was an electrician in Mobile, his name is Louis Keller, he's an old native Fairhope, and he decided he'd come over and put in a couple of base plugs for Aunt Laura. So he came over there with his bracing bit, and he got down on the floor there, and he started cranking that thing, and he cranked, and he cranked, and after a while, he had a great big pile of fat-lighted shavings. He was wore out. He was going to put in about 6, and I think he ended up putting 1 base plug in the house. But that stuff, it was so fat-lighted, and the termites, I don't think, could ever get in there because they couldn't stand the grind. But the house has the windows in it, 36 by 36 lift windows, and it didn't have any weights or anything like that. We always had to pull them up and shove a stick under them, or a broom handle or something to hold the windows up. And of course, when we moved there, we had an outhouse. We didn't have any bathroom facilities and no lights. When we first got in there, it was in 1925, 26, and 26. We was in there because we got in there just before the 26 storm came. And after the storm and everything, it didn't do any damage to our house. Other places did quite a bit of damage, but it didn't do any damage to that house. It creaked and it roamed and moaned and groaned and everything else, but it stood there. And when we got to put the bathroom on our place, they were tearing down Wheeler's store. And when they tore down Wheeler's store, my dad went up there and salvaged enough of lumber out of that daggone, well, it was a 2-story building, but he salvaged enough of lumber out of there to build 2 rooms on the south side of our house, which one was a bathroom and was another little utility room. And that, I can't remember what year that was but it had to be probably in the early 30s or late 20s. And about building and everything, my family were quite handy at tools and everything, because they had gone down to Miami, Florida, in the boom area down there in 1924 and 25 when they was doing all the construction down there. And my grandfather was a chief cook and bottle washer in this big camp. They had a tent camp, and all of my uncles went down there and worked. And my dad built a house down there and sometime prior to 1926, and he built it out of crates that came off of T-model Fords. They crated the cars up, the fenders and the body and the chassis and everything was in great big crates, and then take it down there on the train, and then they would assemble it down there. And then they had all these boxes and everything like that. My dad salvaged that. And we was living in a tent at the time, but he built this house. It was a small little house. He built that, and then my Uncle Roscoe, he was a finished carpenter from the word go, he built a house, and he built his out of material that he bought. But the 26th storm came down there, and all this was a great big work camp where we was living. And all the houses, most of them all blew down there. As it was going down, the people would start congregating in my uncle's house. And when the storm was over, there was about 150 people in his house. And during the time, they didn't have any ceiling. It was just the rafters up there. And a dang monkey got away in there, and they were entertained with that monkey. They never did catch that monkey until the dang storm was over. And then when they went out and they looked over there, just a little ways over there where my dad's house was, everything was gone. There was this little old tar paper house sitting over there. Didn't hurt it a bit.
Good gracious.
I got pictures of that. It was fantastic. That thing stood through that storm. Of course, we had left there. We came back. We'd left before the storm for some unknown reason. It's like the the Seminole Indians down there. Just before that storm down there, they was all out there on the Tamiami Trail and everything, and in these little old grass huts, and all about 4 or 5 days before that, they disappeared.
Oh, how about
And nobody knew where they were, and for a long time. After a while, here they came back. They went back in the Everglades or somewhere back there. Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting.
Well, let's get back to old Fairhope. When I was coming up along in Fairhope, I can remember that Fairhope Avenue was nothing but a dirt street.
Everybody we've recorded, I believe, has mentioned that muddy street.
The muddy street. And down on the Fairhope Hill it was all the traffic had to come in there by the boats and everything, and it was really a comedy of errors when it rained real hard and see those Model T Fords trying to get up that hill. And the biggest percentage of them, the only way they could get up the hill was to back up because the daggone gas tank didn't have a fuel pump, and the gas tank it had to flow into the damn carburetor, otherwise they didn't get up the hill. My dad run a restaurant in the Fairhope Cooperative Store, which is a store on it's a hardware store now, but it's on the corner of Church Street and Fairhope Avenue on the northeast corner. And that store in it was, back in those days, most of the people didn't have any money, and they used barter. And the people from out on the farm would bring in eggs and trade it for flour or side meat or something like that, and matches, things that they really had to have. And then Mr. Reynolds, who was running it, he was the manager, and that was Isidore Reynolds' uncle. And we lived upstairs at that time in that building. That was in 2023. We lived upstairs in that building there on the southwest corner, and a couple of rooms up there. And I never will forget, they had what they call the egg room downstairs in the grocery store, and they brought all the eggs and put it in there. And it was I guess it was a concrete or some sort of fireproof room, because they put the matches in there, and they were in a old country matches boxes about this big with head on and about that long. And they would take those matches and put them in, just throw them in a number 3 wash tub. Well, somehow or another that night the rats got in there, and they got into those matches, and they started a fire, and the smoke was coming all upstairs and everything. And of course the volunteer fire department didn't have any vehicle that they could run down there. They had to pull it down there. It was a 4-wheel pumper that they had. And of course I was only 4 years old, I guess it was, but I can remember the next morning after they got the fire out, and I looked out the window and everything, and there was a fire truck still sitting in the street. They'd never taken it back.
They'd done enough for one day.
They had enough for one day. But I used to ride the tricycle up and down that street there on the sidewalk, and I just happened to have a picture of it here, of the tricycle that I used to ride up and down that sidewalk.
Oh, that's cute.
And I rode that up and down there, and my dad and them, people would always kid me. I'd ride into the restaurant in there, and I'd jump up on one of the stools and say, "I want a hamburger." Instead of hamburger, I always called it a hamburger. But that was in 19...
Oh, wait a minute. I see something. My date, the date on this thing is way off. Let me correct that. Hang on just a minute. You have another picture, Arthur?
Yeah, I've got a picture of when I was 4 years old, and I guess it was the first coat that I ever had. You can notice the big buttons and everything.
You're all dressed up.
Yeah, I was all dressed up and ready to go.
Okay.
And that was about the time that my dad had the restaurant in the Fairhope Cooperative Store. And also in that store, Ori Lowell had a bakery back in the back of it. And they made the only bread I know that was made in Fairhope at that time was made there. And then later on, the Greeks had a bakery down on the corner of Summit Street and Fairhope Avenue on the southeast corner there. And they had a bakery in there, and I think Jack Titus was affiliated somewhere or another with it. I can remember that. I don't know whether he ran it or what, but the bakery was there, was put in there by the Greeks from up in Albus. But the Fairhope Cooperative Store was quite a thing, because like I say, the barter system and everything, everybody had to more or less grow what they had to grow and then trade it for something else that they wanted. I've seen Fairhope grow from practically nothing since this year. I'll be 75 years old, and it don't seem like I'm 75 years old, but time really creeps up on you. But Fairhope has really blossomed into a beautiful town, and there's so many fond memories that I have of Fairhope, so many things that I could tell. A lot of people say, why don't you write a book about it? Well, I'm not no writer, but I'd like to talk about some of the things that were interesting to me. For instance, I'm just right now reading off the cuff now, because I can remember at the organ school, I lived right across the street from the Bell building. Well, on Halloween night, I got a wire, a piano wire, and I hooked it to the bell in the bell tower at the organ school. And I could sit over in my yard and pull this wire and ring the bell. Well, old man Swift was on the police department, and Jack Titus, and a number of them I can't remember, but anyway, I'd ring that bell, and they'd come running around there, and with their flashlights and everything, they'd look up there, and they couldn't see nobody, they couldn't find any ladder or anything like that, and we'd let them go, be gone, and all of a sudden we'd start ringing the bell again.
That's wonderful.
Ringing the bell again. We'd ring that dang bell, and heck, we wasn't but 10 or 12 years old. And we was having a time. I mean, of course, this is back before TV. You had to do something. But there was also a lot of, I've heard people make reference to it here lately about what we used to do on Sundays. We used to walk down the gullies. The gullies were so picturesque and everything, and they were opened up, and they wasn't filled up with kudzu or tin cans or garbage, but later on, the people used to use the gullies for trash. I can remember some of them, they used to dump all the old automobiles in there and everything, and it just ruined everything. But we kids used to go down there, and we'd get into clod fights, and we'd get that old red clay and throw it at each other, and some of us come back with skin up heads and everything. And one of the most interesting was the one when they made the highway out of Fairhope on North Section Street, what we always call the field. Is down there where it's just before you get to the school there, and it's right beyond the Colony Cemetery. When they made that field across there, they hauled dirt in there from, God only knows where they hauled it in there from, but they made that big field there and put those big double culverts in there to carry the water from the east down what we call the Big Head Gully. And we'd go down there on Sunday. There's nothing but dirt, no paving, anything like that. And we'd get on one side, a bunch of us get on one side and one on the other side of that field, and we'd throw at each other, and then we'd try to go from one side under through the covers to the other side. And there was one of the boys there picked up, I think it was one of the Logston boys, either Bobby Logston or Icky or Billy Logston, picked up what he thought was a piece of dirt. It looked like dirt, but it was a piece of sandstone rock. And he throwed it and hit one of the boys on the side of the head, and it knocked him cold. Well, down that gully was used to be water running in there, and we went down there and got water and brought it back up there and revived him by pouring water on him. But it scared us. We were scared to death. That daggone rock hit him with it on the forehead.
Good gracious.
But it's a wonder we didn't kill each other and everything else. But talking about killing each other, I can't remember when it was, but there was a boy in Fairhope by the name of Larry Harper. And Larry Harper was the son of a dentist. And Larry was very ingenious, and he made him a diving helmet out of an old gas tank off of an automobile. And he made it and cut it so that it fit over his head, and he had a garden hose to the top of it. And he went down in Flower Creek in what we call Devil's Hole. We always thought it didn't have any bottom in it, anything like that. But I can't remember whether it was on a Saturday or Friday, but it was sometime when he and a bunch of us went down there. And he went down in that water, and we was pumping air to him down there. And after a while, we gave him a signal on the rope to come up. Well, he never did come up. And somehow or another, I don't know what happened to him, whether he had an attack or, because he was a big boy for his age, had a tremendous physique, and a good-looking guy, and one of the nicest fellows you ever been around. And they had to call the...
Can you wait just a minute till the clock stops chiming? Yeah.
Well, Larry was liked by everybody, and he had got down in that water, and somehow or another he either had an attack or something, and they had to call Mr. Bernhardt and a bunch of the people from volunteers from the town of Fairhope down there to try to find him, and they took long poles and tried to get down in that water, and they figured the water must have been about 22 feet deep down there, because it was real deep and cold. People tried to go down there, just diving down there, and they couldn't go down there and stay down there and come back up. So they finally hooked the pole into it with some fish hooks or something into the back of his bathing suit and pulled him up. And of course, that was one of the most tragic things in my life in Fairhope that really left an impression. I don't know if anybody remembers it.
I'm going to ask you, what year, do you know about what year that was?
It had to be in the early 30s.
Okay, I remember hearing the story. I wasn't born until 1933, but I remember hearing that story, and it really affected everybody, my parents and everybody.
Well, I guess you have to take the good with the bad and everything on tragedies like that. Fairhope has had quite a few tragedies. One of them was Jesse Stimpson's kid brother. He went hunting, and a bunch of fellows went out hunting, and they came back and they had the shotgun in the back of the truck, and somehow or another hit a bump in it, and it hit him in the head and killed him.
Oh my Lord.
I can't think of his name. I know a lot of people in Fairhope could remember. I know it was Jesse Stimpson's kid brother. And some of the tragedies, things that happened in Fairhope. Robert Jowers, who was son of the barber, Mr. Jowers had a barber shop on Fairhope.
Frederick's brother.
Uh-huh.
Had a barber shop on Fairhope Avenue, and we all played around together. He was just a little older than I am, but we all of us kids played around him. And one day he got sick, and nobody could figure out what was wrong with him. And he stayed there in that house. It was on, what's the street?
Delmar.
Delmar. He lived down there on Delmar, and we'd go there after school and see him and everything like that. And when that boy, he died, I mean, it was so tragic for a young fellow like that. And I don't know whether it was leukemia or what it was, but it was something that the doctors couldn't stop, couldn't do anything for him. And then I remember people, boys dying with spinal meningitis when they'd they would get it in the back and everything. Of course, it might have been what was it? They used to, when they take all the shots and everything. Polio, so like that. But I don't know. But there was quite a few tragic things like that happened.
Wesley Stapleton's sister had it.
Is that right?
Uh-huh.
Well, now that family really took that hard, the Stapleton family, because they just worshipped the ground that girl walked on, and they built a great big canopy over to shade a grave down there in the cemetery. I remember that. Of course, her father was a finished carpenter and contractor and everything. I guess I'm rambling around, but
at least a couple of kids that got buried
in the gully.
Oh,
yeah. Oh yeah, there was a group from the organic school that went down there and they dug in the gully and it caved in on them and they had to go down there and dig them out, and they couldn't revive them. Of course, they didn't know all about how to revive them nowadays. But one of the things that happened was what was the people that lived up on North Greeno Road? The boy that went sailing and drowned. Her brother, she's married. His sister is married to. It was in the paper where they celebrated their 50th anniversary.
Yeah, Goodrich.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Emmett Goodrich's son.
Yeah, Emmett Goodrich's son went out in a boat and drowned, and that was so tragic too. It seemed like things like that just leave an impression on a person, and it's probably a lot of people that talk about a lot of things other than what I do.
Well, and I think everybody was more close to each other in the.
Oh yeah, closer together.
Right.
You did more visiting and everything. Mm-hmm. People nowadays you say like, I haven't seen you in how long, I don't know. And I haven't seen her since, I guess since the 30s, and that's been a long time now.
I've changed a bit since then.
Changed quite a bit. And of course I knew her sister, and when she was married to Raymond Wood, and now she's Mrs. Myers. So, and is Raymond still living? I guess he.
Raymond is in Spanish Fort.
Spanish Fort, but he's not married now, is he?
No, he isn't.
Well, I used to work for Raymond Wood Sr. At 711 Virginia Street in Mobile. I went to work over there for Raymond Wood, and his wife at that time was Vera McKenzie. Mm-hmm. And of course, Raymond had been married, I think his first wife was Camilla Wood, which was Captain Ed Roberts'.
That's right.
Captain Ed Roberts' sister. Anyway, she, when I was working for Raymond Wood down there, Vera did all the bookkeeping in there, and they had a secretary, and then I was back in the warehouse, and I never will forget, I was always a big devil, and I went back in, I took a piece of spring steel that they use for snaking wire through conduit, and I cut a piece to cover my hand like this. It would fit right over my hand like this, and I welded a great big spike out here, and the other end out here like this. And then I took red paint and I poured it all over my hand, and I walked into the office in there, and I said, could somebody help me out? And Vera looked at it, and this old gal that was a secretary, she fainted, and Raymond was in on it. He knew about it, and he come in there, and he got to laughing because the secretary was passed out over there, and Vera was trying to revive her. And here I was standing there with this, looked like blood dripping all over my hand with that great big spike through my hand. When Vera found out about it, found out things, she chased me all the way up Washington Avenue, nearly to town. She was.
They had a right to be mad.
Oh, I tell you, yeah, of course. I was always doing something crazy. Uh, I get off on different subjects, but thinking about crazy things. Back in the organic school days, when I lived across the street from the organic school, they used to have kite day, and it was in March, and they'd make a kite, and they'd make different kinds of kites. Some of them would make box kites, some of them make bow kites, and they would have which one could fly the highest, which one was the prettiest, which one was the biggest and the smallest and all that. Well, I made a fighting kite, and I had a reel where I could reel it in real fast, a winch on it that I could wind it up instead of going like this and the thing, you wind it up. And I made my kite up and I put a long tail on it and had 3 or 4 razor blades on the tail. And I got up above everybody was down there on the where the baseball field where they used to have the May Day festival and thing. And I'd get way back up behind them and I'd let it out real fast and that kite would fall. Everybody said, look at that kite's falling, that kite's falling, that kite's falling. About that time I'd tighten up on it and the tail would go across through there and it'd cut all the daggone strings and all the kites would fall.
Oh my goodness.
And everybody would, of course I'd wind mine in real fast and take off. But I cut more daggone kite strings over there on that campus and everything. And this gal in Fairhope, she used to be Margie Edwards. What's her? Ewing? Margie Ewing? Well, I went to see Margie Ewing when her brother came here, Danny. And of course, I'm always a nostalgia bug and wanted to go back and talk and reminisce things, because I remember when the Osprey was built in the organic school there, and a lot of the kids come up there and they'd had the sand on that thing, and I remember her dad and I think it was an old fella by the name of Montague worked on that. And so I went to see Margie, and I told Margie, I said, one of the most memorable things that I can remember being associated so close to the organic school but not going to the organic school was Ms. Edwards would come there at night and set up a telescope out there in the yard between the science building and the Bell building, and she'd set it up out there and we'd look at the moon. And that was something to see. I mean, she had a big telescope, and that thing would bring it in, and we'd say, oh, I can see the moon, the man in the moon, I can see the man in the moon.
Oh, that is wonderful.
We would look at, and she was quite a character. She'd come to school and have a great big old chicken snake in a blouse, something like that, and bring it out. But when I saw Margie, and that's one of the things that I wanted to tell her, that her mother left a lasting impression on me, because she was a wonderful person.
That's something people back in those days in small towns, and especially in the South, didn't have access to.
No, they didn't have access to anything like that.
Fairhope is unique.
Well, when they started talking about making a museum for the organic school, I hit upon the idea of making a scale model of the organic school, to the best of my knowledge, somewhere around 1930, more or less. And I had to determine the scales of the buildings and everything, I had to use photographs. There was no blueprints of each one of the buildings. It was built from scratch. So I would take the building, say like the music hall, and I knew that the door was 36 inches wide and 6'8" tall, and I'd take that and I'd determine the scale of it. So I went on and made a scale model of the campus, which is now on display in the museum down there.
Yeah, beautiful.
And a lot of things of course I look back and everything I can remember, but I never could get a picture of the Spanish room, the Spanish building, which was south of the of the school home down in the hollow there. It was like a little A-frame down there, but it was called the Spanish room where they taught Spanish down there. And that's not on the model, but I do have the old walk where we used to go across where burglars used to dump all the buttermilk and milk down in the ditch, and used to run right back to the school home there and went on down and crossed Morphy Avenue and on down towards the old German Hall down there. And I put that in there, and of course, what's the Myers boy's name? He lived right up there on the corner right there across from where the liquor store used to be. Reed Myers. Reed.
That's Anna's,
Yeah.
my sister's husband.
Yeah, well, he used to live right there on that corner. Of course, it brought back a lot of memories because that's where he went to school, right across that little ditch down there.
Yeah.
And we got in trouble there. Somebody in the school, they had a garden down there. I guess they was teaching them how to grow vegetables and things like that. And they also used those vegetables up at the school home to cook for them and everything, because they had boarding students in there. And talking about the boarding students, they had a guy there that was, we called him crazy. But we had, a game we used to play, we called stick-ups. And you take a long stick like this, or a piece of hickory or something like that, and you would sharpen it, and you would throw it down in the ground, and then another guy would take and throw his down across it like this, and if he could knock your stick down, he got to pick up your stick and knock it over so far that he could knock it. And when he'd knock it, the guy that owned the stick had to go over there and stick it up once, while this guy had to stick it up 3 times or something like that. And if he didn't do that, then he got his stick. Well, in the process of them playing stick up there, this boy, I don't know whether his name was Billy. It wasn't Billy Bandrews, it was Billy. Anyway, he hit a stick and it hit me in the head and broke my head open.
Oh.
And I never forget, Miss Johnson came over there and they carried me off up to the doctor, and I think it was Dr. Skinner had to sew my head up. Had to put about 4 or 5 stitches in my head from getting hit with that stick. Of course, we'd play some of the dangest games back in those days at spinning the tops. We'd had a big ring and we'd wind the top and throw it down with a string on it and pull it, and it would spin. And then if somebody would throw it while that one was spinning, the other one would hit it and knock it out, then you got that top. And of course, we played keeps for marbles. We'd shoot marbles, and I got into some of the damnedest fights when I was playing marbles. I don't know why in the world, but I got in a fight with one old boy up there right next to Wheeler's store. It wasn't a sidewalk, it was just a hard walk there, dirt. And this old boy by the name of Lawrence Simmons, he and I got in a fight there, and he beat the devil out of me. Well, my dad run a little restaurant right across there on South Section Street there, just before he got to Greer's store. He ran a little restaurant. He came over there, and he grabbed a hold of me, and he took me behind the daggone carriage house, which was behind Wheeler's store, and he told me, he says, "You can beat that boy." He says, "Go around there." He says, so he brought me around there, and he started coaching me a little bit, and then everybody got on my side because old man Keller came out there, and they started hollering for me, and I beat the devil out of him there. And we both had bloody nose and eyes swelled up and couldn't hardly see each other. So I never will forget, about 2 days later, when I was able to get back in school and everything, he came to school, and it was up in old lady Millbrook's class, and he came in there, and he came over and started to hit me, and I hauled off and hit him before he could hit me and knocked him across a couple of girls' desks. But you know, a lot of good came out of that. I'd get in a fight after that. I'd get in a fight with the Burmaster boys, Billy Burmaster and Tommy Burmaster and Clarence Burmaster. Well, they was Stewarts, Billy Stewart, Clarence Stewart, Tommy stood. They were nephews of old man Billy Burmaster. I'd get in a fight with them or somebody else, and next thing I know, here was old Lawrence Simmons right in there beside me fighting on my side. So, but I got in more fights at school, but the dangest fight I saw at the Fairhope School, just north of the old elementary school there was two girls that went to the public school there. There were the Stubblefield sisters. It was Margaret and Mary Stubblefield. And they got in a fight with a big old gal there by the name of Isabel Chappelle. And if you ever saw, and the teachers come out there to try to stop it, and they got the worst end of the deal. All three of them jumped on the teachers. But that was a hair pulling if you ever saw one in your life. Those two little old gals and this big old gal there, they worked hard. Margaret and Mary really put the screws to Isabel Chappelle. She never did say any more to them after that. That was it.
It sounds like Fairhope was a pretty rough place for kids.
Well, after that, this cousin of mine got in a fight with an old boy by the name of Willard Nelson. He got in a fight at about the same place where this Isabel is, right north of the school. And Willard Nelson pulled out a daggone sewing needle that they used to sew up potatoes with on the package shed, and he stabbed my cousin in the arm.
Wow.
The blood went everywhere, and old Toady, he didn't know what he was that big old boy. He looked down at that and started crying. And we chased Willard Nelson, a bunch of us kids, the teacher said, "Get him, get him, get him." And heck, we never did catch that little, he'd out scamper all of us. He went down towards Point Claire somewhere and got lost in the boondocks. But see, back in those days, when I went in that school there, my first teacher was old lady Self and Elizabeth McKenzie.
Now, is this the public school?
In the public school, the first grade was Elizabeth McKenzie, and this was in 2027. Elizabeth and old lady Self, and then Mrs. Lottie Gable taught me in the second grade. In the third grade, old lady Young taught me in the third grade. And in the fourth grade, Annie Bell Phillips from up at Little River taught me there. She later became Dr. Hadley's wife, who was the dean of men at South Alabama. And I think both of them deceased now, I'm not sure. And then in the fifth grade in that school was Mrs. Middlebrooks. And she taught me, I can remember her real well, she taught me how to play the mouth harp. And then Mrs. Beatty taught me in the sixth grade. And I think we were the first classes that were in there where there wasn't the whole high school in there, because I think the high school moved over in the new building in 26 or 27 somewhere. 26, I guess it was. But there was quite a few incidents that happened in the grammar school. I never will forget old Preacher Cross lived right across the street. He was a retired minister, and he had a nice garden down there south of his house. And for some reason we little kids went down there and got into his radishes and into his carrots. And we ate a bunch of those daggone things. And they caught us. And brought us up there to school. And of course, boy, we thought that was the end. Anyway, they took us in their room there, and a couple of teachers came in there and took us out in the hall. We got out in the hall, they said, "All right, now y'all, you roll up your pants." And they had these big old switches. And they rolled the pants up, and they told us told us real low, said, "Now, when we start beating on the wall, you start hollering." So when they got them switches and they got them up against the wall, wham, wham, wham. man.
my goodness.
And we'd, oh. And we were just hollering. After a while, it quieted down. So, and they said, now when you go back in there, wipe your eyes and everything like that, like you've been crying. So we went back in there, and we never did tell them that their teachers didn't whip the devil out, but nobody else got into any radishes or any carrots anymore.
That's funny. Oh my goodness.
I guess I've rambled on and so many things that I could just think about that was just, they come, as I think about them, they were funny in a lot of respects.
Do you, you were born in 1919? 1919.
1990.
Okay. Do you know, Ruth, when Clarence Darrow is supposed to have spoken at Coming
About
Home?
22 or 23.
Oh, so you were just a little
I
fellow.
remember Clarence Darrow, and I remember Ethel Darrow.
Yeah.
And all my life, I remember Ethel Darrow living on Fairhope Avenue out beyond School Street there, in a little old house back there. And she was a little old lady, drawn up and everything, and people would look after her and everything, and she was sort of destitute in as much that her brother was one of the most noted lawyers in Chicago, I guess it was. Yeah. And I didn't realize it that Mr. Tone, David Tone's daddy, was affiliated with Clarence Darrow.
Yeah.
And that was one of the reasons why the Tones was down here, was because of Clarence Darrow. I'll never will forget one time when I was learning how to drive. We were delivering ice out to Axel Johnson. That ring a bell?
Oh, yes.
Well, Axel Johnson was living out in the country then. He had a place out there north of where your aunt and uncle used to live. Anyway, we was
that on 104, Highway 104?
Well, your aunt and uncle lived on 104, and this you went up towards Higby's up there.
I see.
And they had a place up there, and my dad and I he had a little old Chevrolet truck, and I was being smart and everything. He'd carried the ice into Axel Johnson's house, and he'd already turned the truck around and was headed back out. And all I was along mostly just to open gates and close gates for him. Anyway, we were parked there, and the barnyard was all out there, and all his equipment was just pulled up against the fence around like that. And so my dad was coming back out, and I was going to be smart. I got out there and had to crank the daggone old car, and I cranked that damn thing up, and it was in gear, and the throttle was pulled back, and that damn thing took off, and it was going in a curve, and it was headed right for the barn, and my dad run out there, and he jumped on the side of it. Of course, my dad was real heavy, and when he jumped on the side of it, he grabbed the wheel, and he turned it. When it turned, it went right towards a daggone disc out there that had a tongue where they used to pull them with mules. This old disc, and that dang truck backed right up on that disc, and that tire went around like that, and just sliced it. Sliced it all up in pieces. It was sliced all up, just one time. And my dad, of course, he was mad as hell at me, but after we got to laughing about it, because it was something you'd see in the movies or something like that.
It sounds like a Laurel and Hardy routine.
Yeah, Laurel and Hardy.
My goodness.
And then, talking about that and the automobile turn and everything, down on the north end of Bayview, down where the old Nettle place was, somebody and myself were coming up there in a T-model Ford. It was just a dirt road. And we was coming up there, and we got to that corner, and we was going a little too fast, and he turned the steering wheel, and when he turned the steering wheel, the darn thing went past center or something, and it locked. There was a big pine tree right on the corner there, and a barbed wire fence up this way, and a barbed wire fence down this way. We went around that daggone fence, around that tree, and back through there, and around about 3 times before we stopped. And went around through there. barbed wire fence. Because the daggone, you couldn't straighten it back up after you got so far over, you couldn't
Oh,
straighten
man.
it back up. So before we stopped it everything, we went through the fence about twice. Have you got any questions there?
Well, let's pause a minute and we'll think about it. Okay, Arthur, tell us about what your occupation was in Fairhope, or occupations.
Well, when I was 17 years old, my father died, and he had a school bus contract, and it was one of the last school buses that was owned by individuals. And he had a school bus contract to deliver children from way out around Penry's place in Belfast to the Belfast School, and from the Belfast School to the Daphne School, and from the Daphne School to the Fairhope High School. He had to furnish the truck, the driver, the fuel and everything, and the contract was for $130 a month. And we drove that. It was a 36 Chevrolet truck, and we had driven that for a number of years. In 1937, my father died. He was 45 years of age, and I wasn't but 17 years old. So they had to get a special, I was the only child in the family, so they got a special permit to get me to drive that school bus. And I drove it for about 4 years, and I missed 3 days of driving in 4 years driving it. And then after, I went to work in the shipyards in different places like G.R. Wood and Company and Gulf Shipbuilding Corporation. And finally, Arthur Thomas talked me into going over and putting in an application at the Corps of Engineers. He said, they need somebody that can draw. I said, well, I can draw, but I'd never drawn a line drawing with a ruling pen or anything like that. So he talked me into going over there to the Corps of Engineers, and I went over there and they put me up on a drafting table and said, draw a straight line. They gave me a ruling pen and a straight edge, and I drew a line down through there, and I thought, man, that's easy, it's falling off a log. I drew that line down there, and the old guy that I was hiring me, his name was R.H. Alcorn. He came over there, and his head draftsman, and he said, this boy here said he can draw a straight line. And he said, yeah. I said, do you think that's a straight line? I said, yes, sir. He says, take a look at it. Look down from one end to the other. And I got down and looked down that table, and at that thing, it looked like a dang snake laying down there. And I was so embarrassed there that I thought I had drawn a straight line. But anyway, they hired me.
Uh-huh.
And I went to work for the Corps of Engineers, and that was in 1942, the best I can remember. And I put in 32 years there.
Wow.
I retired in 1974, and as of the 30th of June, this just past 30th of June, I have been retired 20 years.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever ride with my father, or?
Yeah, I was in carpool with your father, and I rode on the bus with your father many, many times.
Yeah, because he was working the same period of time
Yeah, he was. It was the same period of time. Another person that worked over there, and that was Billy Payne's father was working over there somewhere, and he was one of the first. I can remember him going back and forth when they had the old causeway and driving back and forth, and people would go up there and try to catch a ride with Mr. Payne to go to Mobile.
Yeah. Daddy worked for the Coast Guard.
My uncle worked for the Coast Guard until he retired. That was Roscoe Keller. He worked for the Coast Guard down at the old where they had the lighthouse depot and all. And he retired down there. He lived in Fairhope for many, many years. He lived up on the corner of School Street and Magnolia Avenue on the northeast corner there. And I can remember they got my cousin, Sheldon Keller, was always interested in electronics back in those days, and I can remember him making a radio from crystals, and boy, they got in, we heard Cincinnati.
Oh, wow.
And there wasn't no radio stations in Mobile then, but that's the only place you could get. And you had to put on a set of headphones, and we'd listen to that thing, and he'd get it on there. I got it down. And while we'd listen, we'd pass it around there, and we'd go up there and say, oh, Saturday afternoon or Saturday night, I guess it was Saturday night, listen to Cincinnati on the radio.
Better than TV.
And then my uncle bought a player piano, like that over there. He bought a player piano, and boy, people from all up and down the streets and everywhere would come down there to listen to that damn player piano. Man, that was something out of the boy.
Well, it really was. They fascinate me today.
Well, they do me too. That one over there. This one is got a. You don't have to pump it. It's got a billis in there that's run by electric motor.
Uh-huh.
Got a fan in there. A lot of my memories go back to the Fairhope Pier, on the old Fairhope Pier when they had the warehouse out on the end of it. And we would go out there, go fishing out there. And way back in those days, there wasn't no reel and rod, and we'd use what they call a hand line. And we'd take a long string, like a kite string, and we'd put a big weight on the end of it, and put a hook out there, and we'd throw it out there and catch fish, pulling it in by hand. Well, we was out there one day, and we was fishing in Grover Lowell, who we used to call Dodo. He lived up on White Avenue before you got to Section Street. His father was named Grover Lowell. Anyway, we were out there fishing, and Grover got the idea that if you put 3 or 4 hooks on there, you'd catch more fish. We were just fishing with one hook on it, and so he put about 3 hooks on there, on this line with this big old weight on it. And he gets out there and he winds that daggone thing up to throw it out in the water, and he winds it up. And he lets go, and the last hook caught him right in the finger right there. Caught him in the finger and like to pull him overboard. They pulled him out like that. And boy, he was just a crying and everything. So I went over and we cut the line off and said, we got to take you to the doctor to get that daggone hook out. The hook was all the way through. So we go up to Dr. Goodhart's office, who was up there in back of Moria's drugstore, and we got up there, and Dr. Goodhart looked at it like that, and he goes out in his car and gets a pair of pliers.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, what the hell is he gonna do with them damn pliers? And he got out there, and he put it up there, and he cut the daggone barb off, and he just slipped the daggone hook out. And he put some methylate on it and let it, and we said, how much do you owe him? And he didn't charge us a daggone thing. But nowadays, they would give you a tetanus shot, and they'd want to know your past history and whether your mother came over on the Mayflower just because you got hurt.
That's true.
But
that's progress, I guess.
There's so many things that, of course, you think about back through the years. One of the things that happened, Dr. Skinner lived on the corner of Section Street and Morphy Avenue. And his oldest daughter was graduating from high school. And of course, she was much older than us. He was going with, at that time, with Dr. Mason's oldest son, who became a doctor in Shreveport, Louisiana. Anyway, they were going to, I think it was a prom, and she had a bedroom on the side of the house, and we was all playing around there, and I don't know how it happened, anything like that, but there was a garden hose there, and it just happened to be hidden in that window, and somebody turned the hose on and wet her down.
Oh boy. And
of course she was so dignified and everything, and so everything had to be just so. And when that happened, gosh, all hell broke loose. I mean, they called the police and everything. Us kids were scattered in 411 directions. But it's a funny thing, and another thing happened.
Y'all were, I think you were with the little juvenile delinquents of Fairhope.
I know we were. About that, some long time after that, Mr. and Mrs. Fredericks and Paul and Buddy Fredericks moved into the house on the corner right across the street from Dr. Skinner. And we would congregate there during the summer and late in the afternoon and play games such as Run Sheep Run or Steal and Base or Kick the Can. Anyway, Junior Skinner was quite a little devil himself, and he did something to me, and he thought he'd run into the house. Well, he ran into the house all right, but I was right behind him, and I had taken my belt off in the meantime, and he went all the way from the living room, the dining room, and the back bedroom, and I caught him back in. I hit him about 3 or 4 licks at, and Mrs. Skinner and all of them wondered what is going on, and I come back out of there, and Junior, of course, he never did bother me anymore. He never did pull any tricks on me anymore.
That was the end of that.
Well, I spanked the devil out of him with it. I know we've reminisced that a million times, especially Billy Stewart, who is now deceased. He and I, we really got a kick out of that time. Eugene McKenzie's family lived down on South School Street, down 3 or 4 doors from me. And Elizabeth and Vera and Iris, Ellis, Walter and Willie, and Eugene. The dad worked at the power plant uptown. He was an engineer for the power plant, and he and different ones ran the power plant. But anyway, Eugene was a little older than I am. You used to call him Pickles. Pickles McKenzie, one of the best basketball players that ever came out of Fairhope. Anyway, he and I would get in a fight down there, and I'd go home crying, and I'd go up the house, and I'd go in there, and my mama would make me a bread and peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And then I'd go back down there and renegotiate with Eugene and give him a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And everything would be all right then. But they would tease me, and one of the things that that I would say, I was only this was before I was going to school, so I was 5 years old. I'd go down there and they'd tease me and everything, and they'd make me mad, and I'd say, I'm gonna put on the gas and haul off and run, and I was right after the house. But we had a lot of fun, Eugene and myself, and there was quite a few other people that moved in there from time to time, and one of them that lived there that I never will forget was Forrest West. Forrest West's father was a justice of peace in Fairhope many years ago, and he had his office in an old tin building which would be in the middle of the block of Fairhope Avenue and Section Street and Bancroft. It would be in the middle of the block there, and later on that building was used by Harry Stradlin as a radio repairman shop there. But Forrest West lived down there on South School Street, right in the house right north of where McKenzie's lived, and he was very ingenious, and he made a thing when he was going to school, and it was really fascinated me. He could make model airplanes and make the wing tips out of split bamboo by putting them over a lamp, and they would bend, and you release them and it'd hold a shape. And anyway, this thing that he made was I may be wrong, and it was called a helicraft or something. it was made with pivot points, and you could go and make a design on paper, all kinds of designs with this thing. And he also had a pantograph, which he could take a small picture and enlarge it into a big picture by drawing. Man, that really fascinated me. I was only 6 or 7 years old, but it left a lasting impression on me. And not too long ago, I went down to Foley and I heard that Forrest was still living, and I went down to see him. And it was really a pleasure to reminisce, and he was so tickled to see me. We'd forgot about each other all those years, and I made a special point to go down there and see Forrest. I guess he's still living, because this was just about 1.5 years ago. But he's up there in his 80s. That was on
where did you say that
Cummins Hall. Cummins Hall on the Organic School was the center of activities on Saturday night at the basketball games there. They would have the basketball games there, and then after the basketball game, they'd have a big dance, and there'd be people like Henry Bishop, and I believe old Johnny Lucasen played in that, and I believe even Abe Stratus played drums there, and old Ralph Hoffman played in there. I believe Irvin Camper played a saxophone, and I know Henry Bishop played the saxophone. And then Ori Lowell played the piano, and of course Hughie Lowell played a sliding saxophone. Trombone. But that was a night that everybody, it went way up into the early Sunday morning before it would break up, and that was, of course, that was back before TV, and it was about the most entertaining thing you had in town.
Yeah.
But a lot of memories go back to Cummins Hall. When I was real small, Mr. Totten, old Judge Totten, run a theater in there. And I think that was the first theater in Fairhope. And the theater was old, wasn't talking pictures, it was all
silent films.
Silent film, and I can remember Charlie Chaplin and all the tirades he went through, and he was a little jerky motions and everything. And then when after they closed up there, they quit there, he went down on, I think he opened the theater down on Fairhope Avenue, and then Mr. Fuller got it from him. But up there in the room where they had the projection, there was boxes and boxes of glass plates about this square, and there was always advertisements of say like dry cleaning business and things like that.
Oh.
And they'd have to slide those in and project them on the screen. And they had those were in color. Man, that was something. That was the first color, man. All the show and everything was black and white. But these, hey, we got more kicks out of the daggone slides that they put in there. It was in color. Man, that just fascinated all of us.
How about that? It's the first time I've ever heard that.
Well, they had that machine there, and they had a regular projection machine, which had a roll of film, but it was just.
But they could put in these slides.
They had a projection machine there that would take a glass plate about this big, about square, and they'd shove it in there, and that projector would shoot it on the screen.
How about that?
Well, right here, I made in 1934. I was 14 years old, and I gave it to Flo May Goodard on the front porch of that place down on Fairhope Avenue. And about 6 years ago, I was showing my boats down at Price Furniture Company, and Flo May said, "You want to show the boat that you made and gave me in 1934?" I said, "Flo, don't tell me you still have it." And she said, "Yes, I still have it."
How about
so
that?
I took it up there and showed it.
Yeah, I was gonna say move it because I couldn't see it. Whoop! Here, let me see what I'm doing here. Oh, good. Yeah. Now that's.
I took this boat up there and showed it for 3 days, and then I put it in this glass case, and I carried it back down to Flo May. And Flora May said, Keller, said, nobody in my family knows the significance of that little boat and the work that went into it and would appreciate it. Says, I want to give it back to you. So she gave it back to me.
Oh, well, that's wonderful.
And at the time I showed it, it was 53 years old. This boat I made, a schooner, I made it about 6 years ago. And at the time I made about 5 or 6 boats. I made each one of my grandsons a boat, a model boat. But this one is made in such detail that the steering wheel on the wheel back here operates the rudder.
Oh my goodness.
And then I made the little hinges on here for the cabin.
Oh, how cute.
It's got
Hatch?
hatch up here for the sails and all. And all the sails and everything go up and down, and they got cleats here to hold them.
Everything with
And
working parts.
It's got about 11 pounds of lead on it, and it'll take off in the water.
Aha! A real sailing sailboat.
Yeah, a real sailing sailboat. But I got a kick out of that, making that, and I've got about 3 or 4 under construction now that I haven't finished because I just haven't got in the mood to do it.
Yeah. Okay.
You want to get over there?
I'm trying to get up closer, okay. Find the right button. I'm shooting right into the light. Hank, get a little bit better look at it here.
I made that in 1934, but I put new rigging on it here about 6 years ago. I put the new sails on it because over the years
Yeah.
Everything had deteriorated so bad that.
Well,
See 'em in there.
I was going to say, what do you have plans for all your
Well,
memorabilia? You have
Yeah.
so many things here. I'm just going to pan them very quickly. And the clock we've already met.
Got out of the fire that old, what's his name, George Fowler had a fire down there on the Greenville Road.
Oh, and
My
you got...
wife worked next door there, and she let me switch this around.
It's amazing how much I can see of it through this thing, yeah.
But that's,
Solid black walnut?
yeah, that
Oh, wow. Talking about the band and playing for the theater?
That's
and
right.
Okay.
And we were
Played
going
the
to
first thing?
expand our
Repertoire.
repertoire, and we